Good day, good people. My name is Brad King, and this is the Downtown Writers Jam video podcast, which is part of the Solid Listen podcast network. Max the Dog and I are coming to you from deep inside the newly remodeled Jam bunker. He is currently asleep under the desk, which is his new favorite place to be, which means this is my new favorite place to be. Really excited to have on the program today Nikki Smith. So I interviewed her episode 72 in the middle of the pandemic, and her first book, All in Her Head, was fantastic, like absolutely fantastic. One of the best suspense thrillers that I read last year. So I'm really happy to have her on the program today talking about her new book, Look What You Made Me Do, which is out in Europe right now in all of the forms. So Nikki studied English literature at Birmingham University before she went into this finance career. And we talked about this a lot on the original program, so we're not going to get into that. But she's sort of in this career and reaches this moment where she's got to make a decision about what she's going to do. And she applies for this Curtis Brown creative course where she begins working on her first book, which then goes on to sort of change the trajectory of her life. And now she's writing. So she lives near Guilford with her family and her cat, who thinks she's a dog, which is interesting because my dog believes he is a cat. So before we get to all of that stuff today, you know, we got a little business to get through. We're going to do it really quickly. So the Jam is now out every Wednesday. That's our hour-long program. You can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you get subscribed, whichever one you want to do. There's a couple things you can do to help us spread the word. First, tell your friends about us. And second, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, head over there and leave us a written review of the show. That's the best way for us to be found. You can also head over to Facebook and leave us a review on our page, or you can go to our website, thewritersjam.com, and leave us a testimonial through the contact page. You can check out our new video podcast series, which if you are watching this, you are doing right now. We released that on the Solid Listen podcast YouTube channel. That is always a mouthful to say, but the audio also goes on our main Jam page. So wherever you're listening to podcasts, you can both hear the long form and the short form version of the show. If you want to buy the books of anybody who's been on the show while you're at our website, click on that bookshop link. When you do that, you support local and independent bookstores across the country. We get a little scratch back. If you're looking for a book to read, we have book reviews, and we are putting up reviews of all the books that we've read of all the people that have been on the program as fast as we can. So if you're looking for something, that's a good place to get a recommendation. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter where you get book recommendations, reviews, podcast highlights, other things going on around the web. Lastly, you can support everybody on the Solid Listen network by clicking on that Patreon button. And for just a few bucks a month, you get commercial-free episodes, special happy hours, and bonus content. Now, like I said, I'm really excited to have Nikki on the program. It is rare that I read a book and absolutely fall in love with it. I love books. I love reading, but it's like anything else. Like not every book lands, even if I happen to like the book. Her first book, Nikki's first book, All in Her Head, it was just, I mean, I didn't put the goddamn thing down. Like it was amazing. And I was like tweeting about it as I was reading and listening to sort of how, like having done that first interview and, you know, like so many other writers, like she wanted to be a writer, but also didn't really know how to do that. And so sort of took this circuitous track to becoming a writer. And that also makes the story so utterly charming because, it, you know, writers become writers most of the time because they just don't stop. They don't really have a roadmap for how to do it, but they're just constantly like, this is the thing I have to do. And they sort of find ways to make that happen. So I'm really excited to help promote her second book. I'm really excited to catch up with her and find out what's been happening in the last year. I really hope that she gets to have some stuff in bookstores because having your first book come out in a pandemic is already a big enough pain in the ass. Having your second one still come out in a pandemic, also kind of a pain in the ass. So really excited for you to hear my interview with Nikki. Thank you for stopping by the bunker to spend some time with Max and I. I hope that you're taking care of each other. Hope things are going well. Make sure that you get your vaccination when you get a chance. Wear a mask, socially distance, do all of those things, because if we can knock this out, we'll all be back in person again, and that's something we all want to do. But for now, sit back and enjoy my conversation with Nikki Smith. Both of your books came out in the pandemic.
They did, yeah. What are the chances, hey, Brad?
Yeah, and these are your first two books, right?
First two books, yes, both in lockdown. So yeah, not a very lucky author so
No.
far.
Did you get to do anything like because it was at the beginning of April, so I know that there were some things have lifted. Like, have you been to a bookstore or seen it in a bookstore yet?
No, not yet.
Ugh.
No, no. I mean, the shop's only opened here probably about a week ago. So, I mean, I think a lot of them are massively behind on kind of stock and things like that. So it'll be a while before it filters through. But I'm used to this. This happened last time as well. So yeah, I
It
think
is
second time around they might be a bit more organized. So yeah.
it's amazing because and I've talked about this with every author. Like, it takes your whole life to write your first book, and then your second one, you really got like 12 to 18 months to get the second one, and you just happen to fall in that time of like, we're almost open, but we're not
Almost.
open. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. Well, I'm just hoping it'll be third time lucky, Brad. You see, next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be pretty great, right? Like, and also, as we know, as an author, back catalog is how you make money. So, like, get that back catalog now. so,
Yes.
so, what was it like? So, Look What You Made Me Do is the new book, and that just came out at the beginning of April. So, what was writing that like in a pandemic? Because I have not been able to write anything.
Have you not? Yeah. I mean, I think authors seem to have gone one way or the other, really. And I mean, some people have been unbelievably creative and they're just churning stuff out, and other people have been completely frozen. I think I'm kind of somewhere in between the two. I didn't feel particularly frozen brain wise, but I've got two teenagers, and it went from everybody being out of the house all day to everybody being in the house all day. So although they're relatively independent when it comes to kind of homeschooling, they were on Zoom and, in lessons most of the time, you've still got to feed them. You've still got to kind of, be there and, checking that everyone's still alive and, that kind of thing. So it changed my working day hugely. So I would have to get up really early, basically, before anybody else did. And that was the kind of my one time of day when everything was quiet. I had a bit of headspace, tried to get the words down. I definitely wrote way less than I'd done, I think, the year before. But I tried to have a word count of kind of 700 to 1,000 words a day and tried to stick to that because I just thought otherwise I'm never going to make my deadline.
Yeah.
So.
And it's just, to me, it's so like, as a writer, I get so much of what I want to write about by being out in the world and like observing things and seeing something and having that question pop in the back of your head that you then can't get rid of. And so when you're in the house, you're just like, I got like 3 questions. Like, what does it mean to be alive? Which is really not a book that you can write, like, is anything real? Is not a book I want to write.
Absolutely, yes. And just, you're so right. And even little things like just, sitting in a coffee shop and watching people and picking up on kind of bits of conversation and smells and all of that kind of thing is very different when you're stuck in your spare room kind of, looking at a blank wall, kind of going, day 74. Yes, where are we going to get inspiration this time? Yeah.
And I mean, the inspiration really is nothing matters. Like, that's the question. Like, oh, nothing. Society can fall apart in a minute. Okay, that's not comforting. I had this illusion that things were better. They're not better.
Exactly. I mean, I had to stop watching the news. I found at the beginning, I was listening to the news all the time and I had to watch everything on TV, and that wasn't doing my kind of mental health any good whatsoever. So I stopped that after a while and I just preferred not to live in ignorance for a while. Yeah.
My best friend and I, she and I did the same thing. Like, in fact, we turned off a lot of the alerts on our phones and stuff too. It's like, particularly when this last guy was in office here, like, I've joked with all my friends overseas, like, who would have thought Boris Johnson would have been the second craziest world leader? Like, I was not anticipating that. And so every day was just an onslaught of terrible shit. And it's like, when you're in a pandemic and trying to be creative and trying to not literally lose your mind.
Exactly.
Seeing that stuff just constantly pepper you. You're like, yeah, fucking everything's terrible.
Yes.
I don't need an alert. So
Yes.
is this another thriller? Like, is that where you're at now? Or like
Yeah.
suspense? I don't like, what do you classify yours at? Because they're not really thrillers. Like the first one wasn't really it was like suspense. It felt like
Yes.
dramatic suspense.
Yes, I think this is probably, you're completely right. Their last one was definitely kind of psychological suspense
Yeah.
as opposed to thriller. This is a bit more kind of thrillery. It's still psychological suspense, I think, but yeah, it's in that, that genre kind of thing. Yeah.
I mean, is that your wheelhouse? Like that seems to be some, because All in Her Head was, I said this in the introduction, like it was fantastic. I told you that it was one of, like, those books are hard to write because there is a formula, and like you both try to subvert it, but also like people are expecting a thing. And that was unlike any book I'd ever read.
Oh, thank you.
So when you sit down, and that was, like that was the first one, so that you have your whole life to write that. So as you sit down to do the second one, I don't mean this to be cheesy, but like, what was in your head? Like, what were you thinking about as you were like, okay, what do I do for the second act of this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody, well, every author I've spoken to anyway, feels, second books are a bit like second albums or something, aren't they? And, I know that kind of publishers are often kind of nervous about getting second novels because, especially if the first one has kind of been received well, there's so much to live up to. So yeah, it was hard, definitely harder, I found, than writing the first one. Because as you say, the first one, there's no pressure. You have, as long as you want to write it, because no one's breathing down your neck. You never know it's going to get published, really. So, it's all in your control. I think the second one was much more, I had a theme. I kind of found a theme reasonably early on that I knew I wanted to write about, kind of coercive control, which forms quite a lot of, it's the theme that runs through the second novel. So that was okay, but kind of plotting and story, it was a very different process to the first time. I think I basically wrote it once and then kind of rewrote it, really, after having thought, oh, that's not too bad, after the first draft, and then kind of went back, read it again, and it was like, yeah, no, that needs, completely kind of redoing. But I think that's maybe just the process that I'll kind of use for other books to write them as well, that you need to kind of write to the end to really understand your characters and get to know them before you can kind of go back and then tell the story how you want it to be. So
I am amazed. So my, I do nonfiction, and when my writing partner and I finished the first edition of our first book, we both said what you just said, which is, well, now we know what the book's about, but it's been published. So that kind of sucks. So when we did the second edition, we literally threw out the whole first edition and rewrote it from the ground up, because we're like, now we know what the story is. And this is one of those horrors that they do not tell writers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, everybody says, oh, you need to know your characters before you start writing. And you kind of think to yourself, well, of course you do. Of course you need to know your characters. And you spend a lot of time thinking about it and planning it. And you think, right, I know my characters. I really know my characters. And then by the time you've been through that whole kind of, writing it, they're completely different at the end to how they were at the beginning. And that's why you kind of need to often, I think, go back and rewrite it again. So yeah,
and it's amazing to me that, I mean, because I know there are some people that don't, who are able to sort of plot that stuff out. Like that just is not in my wheelhouse. Did you? And I've talked about the trauma of success on the show, and like the first book was well received, and like as you're sitting down to write, and not even sitting down, but as you're doing it, like, are you thinking like, I did this trick in the last book? Like, is that like, how much of that was seeping into you're like, I can't just keep doing this thing, even though this thing works really well?
Yes. I mean, I think that the second one was different because my All in Her Head has that big kind of twist about a third of the way through it. I knew that wasn't going to be the case with book two, because as you say, you can't unfortunately do the same thing in every book that you write. So that, I guess, was easier in some ways, that I knew it was going to be a very different book, but I had to decide how it was going to be different, I think. And, I'm not really somebody who writes, I don't think, maybe I will in future books, I don't know, but from kind of point A to point B all the way through. I like it to be a bit kind of twisty and have, different timelines or different character perspectives in it. So the reader feels kind of unsettled and that you don't quite know where you are. But that does take a lot of kind of plotting and planning to work out how that's going to work. So I mean, I do plot. I did have everything kind of down on a spreadsheet. I knew where I was going, but I still ended up rewriting, I think, pretty much, that first kind of 90,000 words, most of them were rewritten. So, yeah.
The big joke that people always say on the show is the only way to learn how to write a novel is to write a novel. And then once you do it once, it doesn't really help you write the next novel.
That's so true. And I think that's what you learn with that, what everybody thinks once you've written one, oh, well, that's okay. You could just do it again. You can just do the kind of same thing again. But every single book is different. I've just finished my third one, actually, which has just gone to my agent to have a look at. And again, it was a different process, with that one. And each time you start, you're looking at a blank page thinking, how did I do this last time? So, so it's not easy.
I feel like the first time I interviewed you, you were working on this book, and now you've just said this book's coming out and the third book's already in your agent's hands. Like, that's having gone from finance and sort of making that decision to do this to like cranking out books has got to be a little surreal for you. It
is very well. I mean, the whole of the last 2 years has been
outside of all of the other surrealness. Yeah.
Yes. So the whole process has been very surreal, and I think, in some ways, when you have to kind of focus on the positive side of things that have happened in the last 2 years, in some way, maybe it's a good thing. It has that kind of time on my own, although I have had a house full of people, but the fact that you're not out, mixing with other authors and doing things, and you are kind of stuck in your house, it does force you to kind of work, really. And and I just wanted to write the best books that I could, so I've done that. I mean, obviously I don't know what will happen with book 3 yet, because I had a 2-book contract, so we'll have to see if Orion want the third one. But it has let me do that, so yeah, that's a positive, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is fantastic that you've been able to like transition into just doing that, like, and cranking stuff out. Like, that's impressive. 3 books, and I mean, it's been like what, 3.5 years, 4 years? Like, it's been pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I got my deal back in January 2019, but All in Her Head did still need some kind of editing, and things after I got that deal. So it's been 2021. Yeah, kind of 3 years. Yeah.
That's amazing. And like, I know like doing it in a pandemic feels a little bit, I tell everybody, and I think I told you probably last year, like, do you have a party planned?
Do you have
a party planned, like for June or July? Like, at some point you need to have a big blowout, because you're going to have a whole series of books and have not had a book party yet. So like, I know planning underway.
I think there's going to be a lot of Prosecco, and I might end up very hungover for a good few days. I think.
Set Twitter aside. Give your phone to somebody else and like have a big ass party, because it is impressive enough to have a book come out and to finish a book. I think it is doubly so to do it under these conditions, just because I just think it's hard to be creative. And it's hard to have a routine when everything is the same. Like, when you wake up in a routine, it's really hard to be like, well, it's 6 a.m. and now I have to sit down in front of this wall again.
Yes, exactly. And I think, absolutely. It is. It's a kind of routine that's forced on you that you don't want to be in. Yeah. And you have no way of getting out of it. And that's the thing. And it's not even like you're really on your own. Well, certainly in my case, you're not on your own, because I've got so many other people in my house as well, that it's just kind of like, times I wanted to go and lock myself in the shed at the end of the garden. And if it wasn't for kind of, being full of wood and bits of lawnmowers and stuff like that, I probably would have done. But it's just like, I need some space and some inspiration as well. Yeah. So
I feel like this thing has ruined every like time loop, time travel story, and every like Groundhog's Day thing. Like, well, nobody's ever going to want to see that again, because we all lived it. It's like, fuck it. No, not going to the theater to see that at all. Yes. So give me the like quick, because so when I read Look What You Made Me Do, I have a very specific thing that I think is about, this feels very much, this feels like a really psychologically dark title. So what's the story about?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's actually a line that somebody says. One of my
Yes.
characters says in the books, and
Probably a bad guy, right? I'm assuming not a good. Good people don't ever say that.
Exactly. Yes, but I later found out after I came up with the title actually for this one because it's something that the character says. But my teenage daughter told me it was a Taylor Swift song after I came out with it, and I was like, it is. There we go. Who knew?
Yeah.
So yes. So it's really it's a book about the dark secrets that are hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect family. And I think the tagline's two people can keep a secret if one of them is dead. So it's about it's about two sisters, Jo and Caroline, who are in their late 30s, and they've grown up, but they've never been particularly close. And then their father dies and leaves his inheritance entirely to Jo. And it's really looking at what happens to the family after that particular incident, and every character is hiding something from each other, as you find out kind of quite early on in the novel, and it's kind of how those secrets come out and the repercussions all the way through the book.
Is it primarily are the two sisters the main characters? Are they
Yes.
sort of the people that? It's interesting, like Hannah Mary McKinnon had Sister D, or like I've read a couple of the thrillers last year of like the sisters, like Janelle Brown's, even though hers weren't sisters, they were like two people that didn't like each other, but then sort of did and kind of teamed up, but sort of didn't. Like, so I feel like this is going to be an interesting read of dark intrigue.
Yes, indeed. So
how fun was it because like in a we'll end with this, like in a time when like the routine is forced on you, is it sort of cathartic to just be like, well, I'm going to bring some terrible people together and like awful things are going to happen to them, and that is like kind of entertaining for me?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought of that actually, but I mean, it's certainly, it's a domestic setting, and I was certainly stuck in a domestic setting, so there's probably an element of that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But I don't have a sister. I've got a brother who I get on quite well with, so so it's not in any way based on me.
Yeah.
So,
I never think, in fact, I've had this discussion with people. I never think any fiction and any of that stuff is ever based on people. I think that we have questions and things that pop up in our head, and that's sort of and it's like, oh, everybody's sort of in this house. And like, when you're surrounded by the same people all the time, like all the bullshit that you tell each other on a daily basis goes away because it's like, well, I'm on top of you 24 hours a day. So that's not true.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Like,
I like the fact, I like exploring, I think, the kind of the way that people act, particularly in families, towards each other, and what other characters kind of see is not necessarily what's going on underneath the surface at all. So I always think that's really interesting. And although it's a family situation, sometimes that can be the most dramatic kind of situation for secrets to kind of blow up in. So,
yes. I mean, I found out I had a half sister when I was 17. So
wow.
That was older than my sister. So like this had been going on for a long time. And the joke that I've told with people is anytime one of my parents is like, we have to talk. I'm like, fuck, like what's going to happen now? Like what new things about to come out? So I feel the premise of this book, like a little bit, maybe more deeply than I should.
Yes. Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Someday I'll write a book called We Need to Talk.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Nikki, I am really excited to read this book. I just got it the other day. I posted photos of that online. I loved All in Her Head, and I can't wait to dive into this one.
Thank you, Brad.
It's lovely to see you again. It's lovely to catch up, and we'll do it again when the third one comes out.
Indeed. Absolutely. Yes.
Have a great day.
I'll be touring around the US by then. Yeah, might get to meet in person. That'd be nice.
That would be fan. All my London folks, when they come to New York, I told them like I'm 5 hours away. Like I will get on a bus and come down just to be like you on the other side of the screen. It's so nice.
Exactly. Yeah. It'd be wonderful. Wonderful when we can go in person. Yeah.
Well, you take care of yourself, and we'll catch up soon.
I will do. Thank you.
That was Nikki Smith. Her book, Look What You Made Me Do, is is out as a hardback, audio, and ebook right now. Before we get out of here, just a couple reminders. If you like what you heard, do us those 2 favors we talked about at the top of the show. Leave us a review if you listen to Apple Podcasts, and tell your friends about us. While you're at it, don't forget to check out the other programs on the Solid Listen Podcast Network, including Mother May I Sleep With Podcast with host and our Solid Listen Podcast queen, Molly McAleer. Don't forget, we got video podcasts coming out on the Solid Listen Network YouTube channel. We have 2 a week over the next 3 or 4 weeks, so make sure that you're checking that out. You can also catch the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. And the Jam is now out on Wednesday, so make sure you get yourself subscribed wherever you're listening to those podcasts, and don't miss any of the authors we have on the show. And remember, you can always catch us on Twitter and Instagram at The Writers Jam. Till the next time, I will see you around the internet.